For more on this, I'm joined by Mary McCord. She served as acting assistant attorney general for national security at the DOJ and is now an MS Now legal analyst. Also joining me right here on set, George Conway, an attorney, founder of the Society of the Rule of Law. He helped co-found the Lincoln Project. He's currently a Democratic candidate in the congressional race for New York's 12th district. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time. Mary, let me just start with you. I think there's an important distinction people may be losing. Pam Bondi wasn't actually let go for some performance reason associated with being Attorney General. It wasn't that she was failing at her job as Attorney General. She just wasn't doing something enough, and that enough is not actually normally a job requirement of being the Attorney General.
Well, to the extent that this firing was because she wasn't able to deliver on the political retribution prosecutions that Donald Trump desires, that's much less a function of her and a function of a couple of things. One, you need evidence. You need facts that actually support a violation of law. And you've got to be able to show that to a grand jury to get an indictment. And we've seen that grand juries have repeatedly refused to indict, or even in the case of Lindsay Halligan and James Comey, when Letitia James and James Comey, when Lindsay Halligan was able to go into a grand jury and get an indictment, a judge has already sort of questioned her presentation and whether she left out key facts or maybe said things improper. And of course, a judge also dismissed those cases because she was improperly appointed. When others tried to then re-indict Tish James, it failed. So you need evidence, you need facts, and you need those to show there's a violation of law. And that's not going to change because somebody else is then in the position of the Attorney General. It's also not the Attorney General who goes into court and presents those cases. And so, I think this problem is one that if Donald Trump thinks he can fix it by putting a different position in that chair, he's wrong about that.
George, give me your take on this, because Mary makes a good point. You need evidence. They keep trying. Donald Trump is obsessed with going after these people he perceives as his enemies, most of whom are just doing their job, right? James Comey, Tish James, they were doing what they were doing. We're not looking at candidates. I mean, Jeanine Pirro at least has some experience as a prosecutor. That's it. Yeah. We're not looking at people who are otherwise better qualified to do their jobs. I'm not giving Pam Bondi more credit than she's due, but she was a lawyer and a prosecutor.
Right. And look, I mean, there are a bunch of problems going on here for people who want to work for the Trump administration. First of all, it's very, very difficult, for starters, to be evil enough and depraved enough and corrupt enough and grifting enough for Donald Trump. But here, the secondary problem was exactly what Mary pointed out, which is you actually need evidence. You can't just make these cases up. Right. I mean, you can't just fabricate evidence. I mean, maybe that's their next step. They'll try to do that. You just can't make cases up. You have to go into a court. You have to prove them. And not that even, these people were not all that competent, the Lindsay Halligans of the world, and Pam Bondi was actually a prosecutor, as you said. But no amount of competence combined with sufficient depravity can bring these prosecutions. They just don't work. But Donald Trump doesn't care about that because he's detached from reality. He's deranged. He's a narcissistic sociopath. And now we have a third thing going on, which is he's failing. Okay? He's floundering. He's screwed up this war. He's screwed up the economy. His poll numbers are dropping, down to the low 30s, which
kind of where it gets stuck.
Which is where it gets stuck. It's hard to see him go any lower, but right. I give him a chance. And so, as a narcissist, as a pathological narcissist, he can't take the blame. So he wants to start chopping away at the people around him. And, of course, he starts with the women because he's a misogynist and unceremoniously gets rid of them. But, there are plenty of corrupt male incompetence, and he's going to get around to them. So which raises the question, who would take these freaking jobs?
Right.
Why do people take these jobs? Why would you want to go? And Pam Bondi actually had a decent, okay reputation. She was a real prosecutor and a real DA. I don't think she was a rocket scientist, but she was respected in her own way. And now she's basically going to be remembered forever as being the worst attorney general in history who literally has has gutted the Department of Justice. It's going to take years
They've
to fix.
literally lost lawyers. They've lost prosecutors.
Who's going to take the job?
Mary, let me ask you this, though, because I apologize in advance because it's such a waste of your time and your expertise, given your experience. But to the extent that you need evidence and that this administration has tried and failed numerous times to gain evidence in some of these prosecutions, how much of this is the process being the point? Does Donald Trump just want somebody who's going to be more of a bulldog, who scares more people? Because I don't know how this ends. I don't know why this is good for Donald Trump. To George's point, he's losing on the economy. He's losing on this war. He's losing popularity. What does going after Comey and Schiff and Tish James and all of these people actually do for him at this point?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because even if it were somehow successful and could get through a grand jury, it's probably never going to get through an actual jury trial. And like I said, you're going to have to come up with some evidence, and that's not going to change if it's Todd Blanche, who's now the acting AG. It's not going to change if it's Lee Zeldin or Jeanine Pirro. And, one of the things that, I think George is right that Donald Trump started with the women because he's a misogynist. Yep. But I also wonder sometimes if the way that Pam Bondi just supplicated herself to him almost was an embarrassment. Todd Blanche has a different style. Todd Blanche doesn't sit out there and preach every day that Donald Trump is the greatest president we've ever had in the history of America, the way Pam Bondi does. She's done it on Capitol Hill. She's done it in public speaking. Todd Blanche is just like the bulldog who just rams Trump's agenda. And I think part of it could be to George's misogynist points. And now I'm way outside of my lane as a lawyer and a former DOJ. I'm now doing, psychology, which is not my expertise. But, when I watch her, I wonder if sometimes that just didn't bother him. He wanted somebody who was just going to be a little bit more forceful. And even though he loves people to supplicate themselves to him, I think maybe it was somewhat off-putting, and maybe he thought that was part of the problem.
It's weird because, again, George, while everybody remembers the files are on my desk just waiting to be reviewed, I remember the testimony in which she was asked about prosecuting Epstein collaborators, and she talked about the Dow.
Yeah,
it's like, well, that was sort of stupid.
It was stupid, but I have an answer to. I mean, I'm happy to go into the psychological stuff with Donald Trump, as you know. I'll answer the question that Mary said. What does it do for him?
Yeah,
it gives him personal satisfaction to hurt his enemies. He will destroy himself if he can hurt them. Right. Which is the big danger for our country. This is what
Which is wild, because I think of him as a self-preservationist, but this doesn't look like self-preservation.
No, he'll take everyone. He
He's going to go down with the ship.
Correct. I mean, it's kind of like what happened in January 6th. That even Mitch McConnell recognizes he wanted to burn everything on the way out of town, and that's the danger with a sick, deranged, malignant narcissist like a Donald Trump. Is they end up destroying not just themselves but everyone around them. And the real question is whether Republicans are going to finally realize we have to get rid of him, too.
Right.
And we have to help the Democrats get rid of him before he destroys us all.
Thanks to both of you. I appreciate you kicking us off this morning. Mary McCord is an MS Now legal analyst and professor at Georgetown Law. George Conway, founder of the Society of the Rule of Law and a Democratic candidate for Congress in New York.